Lakeshore Drive. And on the Reagan Tollway westbound, roadworks wrapping up West Chicago into Aurora. That's traffic. I'm Jim Talamonte on AM 560 The Answer.
Chicago's Morning Answer continues next in our 1 hour heating and air conditioning weather center. That heavy, dense fog is in spots this morning, and it will peel off around 9 a.m., leaving us clouds and sun and a high of 58. Currently 35. Next news at 7:30. Breaking news as it happens. Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan and Amy continues next on AM 560 The Answer.
This hourly segment is brought to you by Get Down to Business with Shalom Klein, the show for business and jobs powered by Tandem HR. Heard Sunday evenings at 6.
This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560 The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. At last night's task force briefing, President Trump asked about a Bloomberg story that broke in the afternoon, that to only the surprise of the New York Times' Tom Friedman, the numbers that the Chinese communists were putting out about the outbreak in Wuhan in terms of total number of cases and total deaths are inaccurate.
No.
Yeah, shocking.
Shocking.
This
Breaking news.
Prior to this U.S. intelligence estimate, there was reporting from Asia Free Press that the number of deaths in Wuhan wasn't 3,300, more like 42,000, according to Wuhan residents. There was also a report that British intelligence put the number of cases at 40 times the 80,000 that was reported. 40 times, so more like 3.2 million. We didn't get details on what U.S. intelligence estimates are, but President Trump nonetheless responded thusly, trying to balance his understanding of the Chinese communist propagandists with his interest in Chinese market for American producers.
Wondering if you received an intelligence report that talked about the discrepancy in the numbers, and if you addressed that with
We have not received that, but their numbers seem to be a little bit on the light side, and I'm being nice when I say that, relative to what we witnessed and what was reported. But we discussed that with him, not so much the numbers as what they did and how they're doing. And we're in constant communication with I would say the biggest communication is myself and President Xi. The relationship's very good. They're spending, they will be spending when things even out. This is obviously a little bit of a hurdle, what's happened over the last month. But they'll be spending $250 billion buying our product, $50 billion to the farmers alone, $200 billion to other things. They never did that before. So we have a great trade deal, and we'd like to keep it. They'd like to keep it, and the relationship is good. As to whether or not their numbers are accurate, I'm not an accountant from China.
President Trump, not an accountant from China, understood. Our friend Bill Gertz over the Washington Times had this exclusive yesterday about a man that he terms the Batman of Wuhan, a key researcher who was involved in Chinese government research that isolated more than 2,000 new viruses, including deadly bat coronaviruses, and carried out scientific work on them, these viruses, just 3 miles from a wild animal market identified as the epicenter of the pandemic. He also reports Chinese officials have refused to provide samples of its coronavirus strains to U.S. researchers.
Why?
Did not allow international disease specialists to visit Wuhan for weeks. We know that, in addition to the timeline of the lies. We also know that they're did kick out U.S. journalists from the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post, the New York Times. So they're not interested in anybody snooping around, and that obviously is suspicious. And there's also some other matters that as we look back at our relationship with China over the last several years, and some incidents that haven't gotten a lot of attention that are getting renewed attention. But let's pick it up there with Josh Philipp, who's a senior investigative reporter from the Epoch Times and the host of the China Report. Josh, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
A real pleasure. Some big topics to talk about.
Yeah. Now, Epoch Times had reported, and we mentioned it on the show, the decline in cell phone subscriptions since the outbreak of the virus in China at a scale of 20 million. Not necessarily saying that there are 20 million people that have disappeared, that there's 20 million deaths associated with the virus, but it's very curious, and it's consistent with the idea that the Chinese communists are doing something to suppress information, to suppress communication, and to suppress any outsiders from coming inside.
Yeah, well, it's an important data point, and the fact is we're just not getting a whole lot of data points out of China. Now, it's 21 million fewer cell phone accounts. Keep in mind that the numbers were rising month by month, not dropping, and during the same time last year, they also rose. In China, you can't just get rid of your cell phone account. It's tied to your social security number. You have to register a facial ID to get it. Right now in China, you cannot even travel around without a cell phone account because your health code is tied to your cell phone account. A green health code means you can travel. A red health code means you cannot travel. And so the Chinese Communist Party is using cell phones for this right now. In February, when they made kids stay home from school, a lot of parents had to register new cell phones because all of the school apps run through a cell phone app, and kids need to use that to access the school. And so really, going by the numbers, you should have had an increase, not a decrease, because right now you can't do anything in China. Kids can't go to school. A lot of parents had to register new accounts for their kids. You can't travel without one. And even in general, even before all this, basically, you can't do much in China without a cell phone account. The Chinese Communist Party, of course, monitors people through it.
There was a report, though, that had a suggested explanation, perhaps in part for this, and one was that the number of migrant workers who canceled their work region mobile subscription as the virus prevented them from entering the country after the lunar holidays in China. Migrant workers usually have one subscription for their work location, another for their home region. And so the drop in the number of users is not normal, but when you look at the bigger picture in context with the migrant workers, that could help explain at least some of it.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's not an absolute. I wouldn't, it's not saying exactly 21 million people died. Even if 10%, 2 million, it's still much higher than what the Chinese Communist Party is reporting. It's true some people do register more than one cell phone account in China. You can have up to 5 accounts. Again, the number should have increased because the Chinese Communist Party is requiring students to have these accounts in order to access their schools, which they need to do. A lot of migrant workers, there's different estimates on whether or not they actually have 2 cell phone accounts because a lot of them don't get paid a whole lot in the first place, and so a lot of them do not register 2 accounts. But even if that were true, the Chinese Communist Party's claims about reopening cities and reopening things, about 90% of them should them back to work anyways. And so the Chinese Communist Party is lying to us either about reopening things, which there have been a lot of mixed reports on, or it's lying to us about the nature of these closed cell phone accounts and what the real death toll is. I believe it's maybe a combination of both of those.
Well, what about American companies that are based in Wuhan, like Starbucks or are they back up and running, or are those lies too?
I haven't seen reports on that. So, for example, with the movie theaters, actually the Hollywood Reporter had an article saying that they reopened the movie theaters and then closed them again soon after. In a lot of places, the Chinese Communist Party is telling people go back to work, but actually local officials are defying the top-level orders and are not allowing people to go back to work. You're starting to see a break in the power structure, which I don't think we've ever seen before, mainly because a lot of the local officials no longer trust the higher-level authorities. In fact, workers trying to travel out of Hubei into Jiangxi were blocked by Chinese police on the bridge, and actually people started overturning police cars. Wow. And we, based on information, we believe that the local government was the one that did that, not the top-level government.
I want to go back to the so-called Batman of Wuhan, as Bill Gertz terms him, this guy named Tian Zhenhua, this leader in the bat virus research work that was being done very close to that wet market in question. He lives and works at Wuhan CDC, a few hundred yards away from the Hunan wet market, said one State Department official that spoke to Gertz. He's among the small team in Wuhan that has contributed to China's obsession in recent years with virus hunting and research. After when he, and Gertz describes he would go in caves and collect these bat specimens and so forth without any protection. He ultimately self-quarantined after the outbreak, but now he's disappeared. And I know the Chinese communists have much experience in disappearing people. But the importance of this guy, who is among those who people are theorizing about being patient zero. We don't know. Nobody said. But the hunt for patient zero, this guy is on the list. This guy's a lead researcher. 2,000 strains of 2,000 new viruses, including bat coronaviruses, that they're doing scientific work on. And now this guy disappears, and we can't get straight answers on China about more fatality stats, much less something as potentially sensitive as this.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's very possible. The Chinese Communist Party was very openly conducting a lot of research on bat coronaviruses, and yes, a lot of that was being done in Wuhan. There's, of course, the China CDC lab, also the P4 lab, not too far from there, and a Miss Shi was one of the largest, was one of the world's major researchers on bat coronaviruses, just happened to be working out of that lab, which itself is only about 20 miles from that Chinese market. And actually, there were a few different whistleblowers who came out of that lab who really didn't get much attention outside of China. A couple of them actually said the virus leaked from the lab. These were whistleblowers from that lab. There was even rumors in China that a young girl who was working at that lab was patient zero. The Chinese Communist Party suppressed that news and even deleted her information from the website of that laboratory. And so there's a lot of mixed reporting. The Chinese Communist Party was openly doing research on bat coronaviruses. The P4 lab actually had reports going back to 2015. And they were publishing reports all the time talking about how they created a synthetic virus which had a bat coronavirus as well as parts of SARS. And they were talking about tests on mice and how it destroyed the lungs of mice, had no cure, and how they were going to start research on primates. And so they were doing that type of research, and it's not uncommon for viruses to leak from labs. I mean, really, it's almost ridiculous that the CDC and the WHO are not taking seriously the idea that this may have come from one of those laboratories, because it really, by all practical means, the wet market narrative is over. Patient zero had no connection with the wet market, at least not the one we've been told about. So where did the virus come from? Somehow the world is just satisfied with not being told an answer on that, and the CDC and WHO don't seem to be interested in looking into it. It's a very bizarre situation.
Here's something else that's bizarre and concerning, and it's the relationship between some of these Chinese researchers and either individual researchers or institutions in the United States. In late November, this is from Yahoo News, in late November 2018, just over a year before the first coronavirus case was identified in Wuhan, Customs and Border Protection agents at Detroit Metro Airport stopped a Chinese biologist with 3 vials labeled antibodies in his luggage. The biologist told the agents that a colleague in China had asked him to deliver the vials to a researcher at a U.S. institute, so the customs agents examined the vials. Inspection of the writing on the vials and the stated recipient led inspection personnel to believe the materials contained within the vials may be viable MERS and SARS materials, says an unclassified FBI tactical intel report that was obtained by Yahoo News. The report that was written by the Chemical and Biological Intel Unit of the FBI does not give the name of the Chinese scientist carrying the suspected SARS and MERS samples or the intended recipient in the U.S., but concluded the incident and 2 other cases like it cited in the report were part of an alarming pattern. Yeah, I'd say so, but an alarming pattern that leads us to where, and why is this not more front and center, particularly in the wake of what's happened since November of last year?
Yeah, and that was handled by the FBI's branch that works on weapons of mass destruction, which is very alarming. And now there's an interesting pattern as well with that. If you remember that professor at Harvard, the one who ran the chemistry department at Harvard, and who was charged for working with the Chinese Communist Party's Thousand Talents program, he was actually arrested alongside two Chinese nationals, one of whom happened to be a member of the PLA, the Chinese military, the People's Liberation Army. The other one was arrested while trying to transfer close to 20 vials of an unknown biological material. We were not told what those vials were. And so going by this Chinese individual trying to smuggle into the United States vials that allegedly contained SARS and MERS, and an individual tied to that Harvard researcher trying to smuggle out 20 vials of an unknown biological materials. I mean, there's some funny business going on right now, and really I think America needs better answers than what we're being given.
And the thing about it, too, is, look, I'm all for, knowledge sharing and scientists working together and so forth. But the problem, of course, is that you have scientists that are under the thumb of the Chinese communists, and there are adversaries, and that relationship between academics, potentially scientists in the United States, that needs real scrutiny, much like it did during the Cold War, to make sure you don't have U.S. researchers and U.S. institutions being flipped to advance the interests of the Chinese for pecuniary, in exchange for remuneration of some sort, or for ideological reasons or whatever.
Well, the Chinese Communist Party has large-scale programs focused on subverting the academic community, the journalist community, and the political community. That is a lot of that's done to what they call the United Front Work Department. The Harvard professor was working with the Thousand Talents program, one of the overt espionage departments. He was getting paid allegedly $50K a month by the Chinese Communist Party. They have other programs, Torch program, 211 program, 973 program, all of which are focused on operations like this. The Chinese Communist Party is extremely aggressive, using underhanded means, getting researchers, journalists, academics in their pockets. And yet, it leads to stuff like this, things that I think do pose serious national security threats to the United States. And hopefully they'll start taking this a bit more seriously, because in my research, this is a large-scale problem. I mean, going back to 2008, I've been researching these operations, and the picture is not it's not a pleasant picture, let's put it that way. It's a very large-scale problem.
He is Josh Philipp, senior investigative reporter for the Epoch Times and host of the China Report. Josh, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Hey, real pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah, very insightful. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Connect with Dan and Amy using the AM560 mobile app. Download it today at 560theanswer.com/mobile.
This is Dan Frio with the Mortgage Update. Please take 2 minutes to listen close to this message. You're no longer working and your home is almost paid off. You receive Social Security and a little pension, but the mortgage payments seem a lot harder to pay now, along with all the other bills. You don't want to, but you start using those credit cards to get through each month. I'm not a celebrity spokesman, but I do know the benefits and the drawbacks of a reverse mortgage. What if I said you could keep your home and not have to make a mortgage payment until you or your heirs sell your home? A reverse mortgage is nothing but an FHA loan that does everything I just spoke about and more. If you're 62 years of age or older and owe less than 50% of your home's value, give me a call, 844-775-LOAN. That's 844-775-LOAN. Or reach me on the web at windmortgage.com.
Preferred Rate is an Illinois residential mortgage licensee and an equal housing lender, NMLS 1850.
Health is a big concern for all of us. One of the best ways to improve your overall health is to lose that extra weight, and you can do it safely and quickly. Even if you're stuck at home, there's no reason to delay. NJ Diet now offers live online video consultations. It only takes 40 days to lose 20 to 50 plus pounds with NJ Diet. Their doctor-supervised, contractually guaranteed program starts with bioenergetically personalized supplements based on your hair, saliva, and blood work. Then NJ Diet uses DNA testing to create your ideal diet plan and workout regimen. You're fully monitored by their certified